Hello and welcome to the ESM podcast. Thank you very much, everybody, if you're joining us for this session. Really pleased to be joined today, as always, with my co-host Sunil Duggal, but more so with David Bullivant of Sunrise. David, great to have you with us. Just perhaps you'd give us a quick introduction to yourself for the audience listening.
Sure. Hi. Hello, everyone. So my name's David Bullivant. I work for Sunrise Software. I've been at Sunrise 20 years now, and in the ITSM industry for 25 years, actually, since I left university. So I tend to work on the customer facing and sales side at Sunrise. So I work with customers across all sectors, really, just helping them understand their ITSM needs and potentially how we can help them.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. And really looking forward to having a really great broad conversation about all things service management.
Absolutely.
So I know you had a kick-off question that you were kind of champing at the bit to ask David. So why don't I shut up and let you fire that in there?
Thank you, Dan and David. Great to have you with us again. Obviously, you joined us some time ago for a LinkedIn Live to talk a bit more about Sunrise itself. Today is perhaps a bit of a broader conversation around, as you said, some of the challenges that people are facing in the ITSM, ESM marketplace. So that question to kick us off. So Sunrise, as I understand it, is predominantly a provider to the mid-market. I think you probably do have some larger enterprise customers. You probably have some smaller ones as well. But, based on what I understand, that kind of mid-market is really your sweet spot. So, and it's an interesting place in the marketplace because obviously you have the big vendors like ServiceNow out there really talking about the enterprise play, platform, etc. What do you see, or what do your customers in that mid-market space tell you are their key challenges from an ITSM and enterprise service management perspective?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's fair, Sunil. We have some tier one customers, but it's definitely fair to say we spend a lot of time speaking and working with that mid-tier sector, which naturally leads to lots of conversations in that sector. Just understanding what their key challenges are and the issues they're facing, particularly around sort of ITSM. So I think the first thing that was in my mind really is, I guess, most of the mid-tier, they're very knowledgeable. There's excellent awareness of ITIL and people are very interested in that. One of the key things we often find is that old analogy, doing more with less, right? So often organization demand is growing. So demand on the support team is growing, but probably fair to say perhaps the resources they have available doesn't necessarily grow in line with the demand on their services, right? So we tend to find in that mid sector, people are really trying to look to do more with less or the same, right? In terms of our ITSM needs, and that's something that I come across quite a lot in my conversations. ITSM is very broad, right? Implementing a full ITSM suite and actually doing every discipline can actually take time and resource to get it rolled out. So that's probably the key thing that we come up and have conversations with quite a lot, actually. I mean, I'm not sure how you find that your side and if you would kind of align to that, but it's definitely something we see a lot. So
I think that's right. The value piece. But can I just, sorry, Dan, apologies. Can I just ask a question, David, around this? Because I think this is a really, really interesting point that everybody, and particularly in that mid-market where monetary resources as well as human resources are more limited, is it that people are unwilling to spend more to get more value, or are they open to the idea of actually making investments in this space because they can see the value across the broader organization increasing as they make those investments? Because often you have conversations with customers, we have conversations with customers where there is a cost reduction element to that conversation, but sometimes it isn't, right? Sometimes it's actually a more open one saying, look, where can we make more investment to increase value? What do you see?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think how I'd probably phrase it is it's almost like a kind of a laser focus, right? So what we often find is they're looking for potentially quick wins. So they're happy to invest, but it's unlikely they'd want to invest in across the broad spectrum, right? So what we often find is they're looking to invest a certain level of money to show the returns to the business and the value to then kind of move on to the next stage, right, and get more investment. What they're not usually looking to do is say, right, I want to invest fully to roll out everything across every area and every discipline. So I'd probably throw in that kind of laser focus. Yes, they're happy to invest, but we have a lot of value conversations to say, look, what are your biggest pain points, right? What are, to use a kind of cliche, the quick wins? What can we do? What can you do for your organization to be able to almost like prove the point, right? Validate it to generate further investment. So that's kind of how I would kind of phrase it, really, to answer that question.
So you've answered pretty much the question I was going to ask, is what are these organizations then doing about that, making more with less? So just to summarize what you said, and I'll play it back so I kind of get it, is that they focus in on one particular area, because I guess then that makes it one, more manageable, easier to measure, and then demonstrate the success or whatever the case may be to their senior leadership team. So how do you then, what's the kind of been your experience of building upon that with the organizations that you're working with and or talking to?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they would focus on kind of the key areas, like you said, Dan. So maybe one area, or the top 3 or 4 pain points, right? So almost like a kind of that I would always recommend selecting a tool on the long-term picture, right? So when you're selecting a tool, which we're not really here for tool selection talk, but you should look at everything, right? What are you looking to achieve? But in terms of deliverables, I think that's fair. It's almost like focus on the key areas, implement them, and then obviously that is the validation and the proof to move forwards. To answer your question, though, how we tend to kind of work with them really is, I think you have to really work in partnership, right? So you shouldn't just rely on kind of requirements and spreadsheets and tick lists and what can you do. It's really about on a one-to-one basis. And at Sunrise, we very much, where possible, I mean, we're having a remote session today, which is great. And it's great to chat to you guys on podcast. But from a Sunrise point of view, and I'm sure a lot of vendors are the same, it's really about going to meet the people. Try, if possible, immerse yourself into their workplace, right? Understand their challenges. That's something that we find works well. So you don't have a disconnect, right? You shouldn't be a vendor and if you like the customer. You should be trying to work together. So that's one of the key things that I find is a good way of doing it.
And can you give an example of maybe like the top 2 or 3, or top 1, 2 or 3 challenges that you've kind of hearing again and again from these organizations? So what is the sticking point for a lot of these companies? I'd be interested to kind of hear the themes, if you like, across verticals.
Of course. So the first one I'd probably want to throw up there, and I'm sure we'll drill into this, is kind of like engagement. So, engagement channels, really. So I know often we speak to service desks where there's so many options available now. So you've got traditional self-service portals and, inbound emails, but there's obviously a whole new world, if you like, around AI and chatbots and those types of things. So that's probably sort of engagement channels is top of the list that we talk to customers about all the time. So, and what I mean by that in terms of why is it a challenge to them, Dan, is so they're obviously looking at what should they offer out to their customer base? What should they offer out to their end users? You don't want to, just because AI is a buzzword, right? How does that actually translate to their business and the value that they give? So that's probably a key one. It is making sure they have the right channels available and potentially pulling the drawbridge up and turning off old channels and moving to new channels. But of course, when you're dealing with end users and customers, right, there's an education piece. You'll have perhaps some customers that are asking for new ways of engaging with IT teams, but you'll always have more traditional, let's say, customers and end users that want to use the mechanisms that are available. So that's probably the top one that comes up a lot.
That's a really interesting point, and I think a use case for that would be, not to be too general about it, but the older generation, like my mum, for example, she'd love to pick up the phone. She wanted to speak to somebody, right? Yeah. Couldn't do anything. No, was totally reluctant to do anything on an app. Whereas the cliche or the stereotype is for the younger generation that they don't want to speak to anybody. It needs to all be done through a chat type mechanism. So you've got that huge gulf, haven't you? And interesting to hear that's kind of been as one of the themes that you're kind of experiencing there.
Yeah. How do you, David? So you talked about immersing yourself in the customer world, and that's probably, I would suggest, an accusation that's pointed at software vendors quite a lot, that actually that they don't do that, and many software vendors would say, well, that's what our partners are there for. So Accession as an example, right? But you don't really have that partner ecosystem at Sunrise, do you? So how at Sunrise do you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, it's very true. So, and that's probably reflected in where we started, really, Sunil. In terms of we do deal a lot with that kind of mid-tier sector. And you're right, we don't tend to rely on a partner network. We tend to, we're a UK-based company. We have UK-based staff, and we very much rely. Yes, we partner with people, but in terms of delivery, we kind of do it ourselves, right? So how do we handle that? I think we've put in frameworks that kind of help us manage that process. So to give you an example, we have a customer success journey. So what, like you said, an accusation you might throw at vendors across all sectors, right? Not just ITSM, is that kind of, you sell me something and then I don't hear from you again until the renewal, right? And that's, we're talking about the challenges of ITSM, and that's absolutely not the way it should be. I can't speak for every vendor, but I'm sure most vendors would agree with me. That's not the way we want it to be. So the customer journey, what that means for us is it's effectively a set program where the customer, yes, we have account management, right? So account managers will go on site and meet with customers. That's important. But the customer journey is that next level above, where you have regular touch points. So once every 2 or 3 months with different areas of our business. Could be development, could be the support function, consultancy. So really trying to immerse customers so they meet more people than just the sales-facing arm, if you want to look at it like that. So that would be a key thing that I would throw out there as something that works well for us. Because you're right, we don't have partners that are out there speaking to our customers every day. The other one, of course, and that's one of the reasons I'm speaking to you, two good people today, right, is we try and embrace new channels and ways of engaging with our prospects and customers. So we don't want to be just we only engage once you're a prospect. We try and work with industry experts like Accession, the Service Desk Institute, those kind of people, just to kind of promote ITSM as a whole without just focusing solely on that, what people might call pushy sales side, right? It's about trying to understand where the market is and how we can help.
It's a great point, right? Because service management, IT service management, enterprise service management, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a while, is such a fundamental thing. And I think it's very important, immerse yourself in the customers, that whole like walk a mile in somebody's shoes kind of ethos, to really then understand the challenges, what their experiences are, and then come up with a plan of action or a program of works that's going to say, right, okay, well, we recognize this. We've lived and breathed your kind of service lifestyle, if you want to call it that. I'm sure there's a better phrase.
Yeah.
And get under the skin. So yeah, I mean, that's something that we take very seriously here at Accession. So I'm sure you'd agree, because it is important to know your customer. That was it, KYC, yeah. Because if you don't, you're just going to say, well, here's something that might work for you. And to your point, David, it's like, and the next time you'll hear from me is when the contract's up for renewal, which is totally wrong. Because again, there's all this emphasis on AI is a hot topic, right? But there's experience, the XLAs, experience level agreements, and how did you feel having this engagement or whatever that could be? And then that reflects onto the customers of that organization, I think. Yeah. So anything to add on that?
Yeah, interesting you bring the XLA concept up, Dan, because David, we had a podcast with
Tim,
people, Stuart Salt and Anchor Tech, who work for a managed service provider, and one of the things that they are doing is developing an experience level agreement framework for their customers. So it's not just is your email service up, but are you actually
enjoying it?
How much you can enjoy email, but happy with the happy with the with the service that you're getting. Is that something that's on your roadmap, perhaps, from a customer success perspective?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a really good one to call out. And I think the other, I'll answer the XLA one straight away. But yeah, the other things as well is kind of disparate systems, right? So systems that don't talk and integration. And my other one was going to be the output reporting, right? Which I think you've kind of linked into with XLA. So you're absolutely right. All vendors and Sunrise are the same, right? Have been focused on service level agreements and service reporting for a long time. And working with the SDI, we have reports that will tell you was the service up, was it available, from the service side, but also from the incident and request side. Did we hit your SLA? But as you said, something that gets missed often is that XLA side, isn't it? Are you? I like the analogy. I think it was Daniel. You said, "Are you happy using the service?" Right? People don't always actually ask that question, do they? So one of the things we're looking to do is our product is designed to be a template, right? It gives a lot of functionality out of the box. So we're looking around how we can record not just, as we said, the technical measurement is a service available, right? So, really the availability management side, which we record, but also I want to call it like the satisfaction side, right? How is the service working? How happy are you with it? Because to us, that leads into the continuous service improvement, right? If you're not gathering the metrics about XLAs, do you have the information? How are you empowered to then make those decisions going forward? So it is absolutely something on our radar. Customers might not always actually know to ask for that as well. They might not necessarily, it's not really necessarily, driven by us getting lots of requirements saying I must implement XLA management, right? It actually comes from partnering with the customer, trying to identify the gaps, and then that will often lead on to areas like XLA. So, not surprised to hear you say other people are looking at that.
Yeah, it's coming out. In our conversations, it's coming up as a bit of a differentiator, right? Because email's email. Email's been around for however long it's been around now. It's pretty well embedded. Everybody knows about it. Everybody knows how to use it. And it's probably not the best example. It's like how happy were you that the Exchange server was up for 99.9% of the time? It's like, well, it doesn't matter. I could do what I needed to do. It's not perhaps the example, but from a customer point of view, and you see this on things like Amazon, eBay, or these kind of like shopping type websites, is, did you find what you were looking for? And then that feedback, Jeff Bezos does a great talk about like the total focus on the customer experience, right? But that's for another podcast. And it is becoming important because email is email. So how can you make it different and better if you're going to provide that as a service to somebody, and then that's where it's like, what can we do to make that experience better? And I'm going to use a really rubbish analogy just now. It's like you go for a haircut. Sunil and I obviously excluded from that. Those of you listening, if you don't know what that means, take a look at one of our YouTube videos and you'll see. But if you went for a haircut and it's £20, and you go in, you sit down, you get your haircut, you leave, or you go to the other hair salon, hairdressers, they come in, would you like a cup of coffee? Here's a magazine to read. There's a TV on the wall. You can watch the news whilst you wait or whilst you're having your haircut. Arguably, those small things make for a better experience. And it's how you can then translate those kind of experience factors, whatever you want to term it, into, let's say, the provision of email. I don't know, here's a biscuit every time you get a new email or something like that. But it is an area of focus, and it's something we hear a lot about. And it's really interesting to see how kind of other organizations, vendors, software providers, and so forth are kind of addressing that.
Yeah, and let's not forget, you make a great point. Let's not forget, Dan, of course, that the expectation, right, using the email analogy, is the service is always available, right? So, you wake up every morning expecting it to work, and if it's ever down. So if we think back to the fairly recent global IT outage and, the kind of carnage really that caused. So you're absolutely right. Even if it's down,
like when you get a power cut in your house, the power should always be on. That is the expectation, and you have a power cut.
Yeah,
it's almost like, how could this be possible? Like your email's not working, right? It's incredible. Anyway, we're kind of digressing somewhat from some of the things that we wanted to ask you. Sanil, I think there's a really great question that you might be looking to pose, but
well, I think I might just change it a little bit, change it up a little bit, right? So
we'll throw David a curveball here, yeah?
Not really, but but what I actually wanted to ask was going back to this concept of Sunrise being really a kind of specialist in the mid-market, right? And that's where you're spending a lot of your time talking to people. If you take ServiceNow as that market leader, they have changed in the last few months, 6 months, their key message. Their message now to the market is, we are an AI-led company supporting business transformation. Gone is the digital transformation piece. This is now about transforming their customers' businesses using AI. Sounds wonderful, right? Yeah. If you are in that true enterprise space. But if you're in the mid-market, what does that mean? Is that something that you think is attainable for organizations? Are your customers coming to you, David, saying, I want Sunrise to be the cornerstone of a transformation of our business? Do you know what I mean? I'm really interested to hear whether that's trickling down or whether that's still in kind of like a space over in the top right-hand corner that, that's staying there for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting question, isn't it? I mean, what I would say is probably the short answer would be probably no. It's not something. It won't surprise you, that answer. Not something that people are coming to us and saying, right, can you transform my entire business and off the back of AI and harness all of that? And a lot of the reason is, and we don't want to go down an AI path because I'm sure us three could talk for 2 hours or 3 hours on that. But a lot of I don't think the full industry has defined AI really, and if you look at an individual company, often they'll have governance teams that may have concerns about AI and the breadth of that. So yeah, I definitely would say no. That's not filtered down to the mid tier. There's still back to probably my early comments. There's still a real focus on absolutely. And Sunrise are doing this. They want to make AI part of what they're doing, right? So there's a demand, and we're offering things like chatbots, but our strategy is mid-tier vendors are never going to be developing their own AI. I wouldn't have thought. You have to accept that there are organisations that are spending, I'm going to say, millions of pounds looking into AI and how they can leverage it. With potentially hundreds, if not thousands of developers working on it. So what I would probably say is chat and AI is very much part of a requirement set, but there's still that focus on other elements as well. And I might be preempting your next question, Sunil, but I think our strategy would be to look to hook into best practice areas, right? So we recently released a chat bot that goes directly to tools like ChatGPT. So we're clearly, as a vendor, not going to develop our own AI solutions. It wouldn't make sense for us or our customers. So interesting. I follow ServiceNow like you. Interesting to see they've sort of gone in that direction. I suspect it will only grow, but we're still not having those conversations about AI across the whole business, right? I still see chat and AI as almost like a functional requirement, but not defocusing on other areas that you would also want to discuss, right? So,
I'm just going to make a point that I think really backs up what you've just said, actually, which by the way, the no, right, is exactly the sort of expected response, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
But Dan did a great piece of research around the use of AI in public sector in the UK. So I think it was over 400 organisations in the public sector responded to a Freedom of Information request. And the question was, what is your use of AI in service management today? The response was, I think, there's a podcast on it, in fact, but very small numbers, less than 5%, I think it was, are consuming AI today. And even looking forward, the numbers that are projecting that they would use AI in their service management solutions is very low. There were some respondents that said, we can't ever see it. Yeah.
We had a great quote back, didn't we, Son? It was like, AI will never replace service desk agents. You know, and that's what that was. The
Funny enough, what a service
Bill
now.
McDermott would probably argue the point on that from Service Now. But anyway, that's a whole other podcast. Yeah, sorry, Sonny.
Absolutely, but I think this is coming.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you know, there is a difference here between what the capability the technology can offer organizations and its adoptability. You know, take ITIL, right? Version 3. How many organizations out there are not actually, you know, really maximizing on ITIL in their organization? They're still very immature. So ITIL is everywhere, okay, but not executed very well everywhere. AI will become ubiquitous. It just may not be executed very well, you know, everywhere. So I guess I'm interested in what, in that mid-market space, given that I think we probably would agree that it's on its way, what are you doing? What should customers be asking either Sunrise or any other vendor in this space about what they're doing to help customers get themselves ready to adopt the technology?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You know, controversially or not, AI is going to absolutely be immersed in businesses, right? And you know, we're just one organization in the picture, but we're absolutely embracing it. And I think, so to answer your question, for me, it's really about defining and looking to define the use of AI and where it can be used. And I'll give you a really good example, right? So we've released, for example, chatbots that can hook into things like ChatGPT. Now, you might think that's a facilitator, but you mentioned public sector. Actually, that can be a barrier, because what will happen is the minute you say you're going to open up ChatGPT, the governance side will quite rightly say, well, okay, how do I control what comes back? So what we've done is we're looking to harness it and say, I'll give you an example. Why don't you just use ChatGPT to do the bits that maybe humans or tools aren't doing? So we basically give a customer options. If you don't want to go out to the big wide world of AI, right? What you can do is almost use your own data set, pass that to ChatGPT to kind of make sense of it and bring it back in a more meaningful language. But what you're doing there basically is you're using AI to improve the quality of data you already have, which might be in your service management tool, but you're not susceptible to incorrect information from the outside world. So to answer the question, yeah, it's really about defining what you want to do and looking at where AI can add value. Because like I said, we found very early on, if we go to a customer, say we've got a chatbot that uses ChatGPT and goes to the big wide world, that might actually be an inhibitor to rolling it out. So it's understanding how to almost enable bits of it as and when you need it.
I very quickly, and I'll pass over to you, Dan. But there's two things here, isn't there? I think you're saying one is, work out within your organization what use cases there are to leverage AI and what AI tools you might then use to facilitate those. The second, though, is perhaps reimagine a little bit some of your existing processes to be able to harness the AI. I wouldn't have thought anyone would have in the first instance said, actually, let's use ChatGPT to make more sense of our data. But once they've got to that point, it might well tell them that actually they need to do things differently.
Yeah.
So it's, how do we rethink what we do to make use of AI is a big piece. Dan.
Yeah, and again, we should perhaps book another session to talk all things AI, because there is a lot to discuss there. But just on the theme of things that are coming up, David, it'd be great to kind of get a sense from what you see in the market now, but what perhaps are your predictions for the next, say, 3 to 5 years? What are customers going to be looking for? And then from the vendor side, from your side, perhaps, what are you going to be offering that's maybe new, innovative, or just to answer that customer demand? It'd be great to hear your thoughts.
Sure, yeah, and I'll try and answer this one without using the letters AI, maybe. But yeah, no, I think for me, what I'm seeing and I'm thinking is moving away from almost like fixed interfaces and more of like a conversational approach. So what I mean is, obviously, traditionally you might have a self-service portal, but it's ultimately a product with fixed screens and fixed data is gathered. What I would see coming in the next 3 or 5 years is more almost of like a conversational thing where you just have an interface, right? And you just ask it questions, be it verbally or typing it in. So I would almost see ITSM might be, I have an app or a widget and I just, rather than have to have a fixed form, right? If I can pick on a quick example,
like a minimum data set, you mean?
Yeah. But rather than have like a new starter form that someone's built, be it dynamic or not, almost like just say, hey, I have a new starter, right? And the interface should almost just be able to guide you through that process, almost like a conversational type thing. I think that's a big change I would see, over the next 3, 5, 10 years. In 10 years' time, will we still be configuring and building fixed forms in products? Probably not. And then I think you asked what Sunrise are doing, and that maybe I've answered my own question actually, but we are looking at more. We've started looking at interfaces that to a certain extent, I do need to say the letters do use AI, right, to help it out, but more kind of almost like workflow driven interfaces where. And of course, it's a given, right? It should exist on any device. That's an absolute core thing. So we're looking at actually just having you deploy a simple interface, and you can be anywhere on the train or wherever you may be, or out and about, and you just ask questions, and it just comes back with solutions. You could be asking like, what's the status of this ticket? But you could just be asking issues that you're having. So that's kind of one area that I'm expecting the market to go that way, and I'm sure people like ServiceNow are also well on that journey.
So just to summarize, and what I understood there, so like a real kind of simplification of that interaction process, whereby you say, "Hey, computer, I've got a new starter. They're starting," and the computer might say, "When are they starting?" "Oh, it's going to be on the 1st of October. What do they need?" "Yeah, they're going to need a laptop, a cell phone, everything else, or mobile phone." Slipped into my American persona there for a second. And then, it'll just drive it like that to the point where it gets the information it needs and then goes off, and somebody's created that workflow, or it's dynamically created somehow by the use of a certain 2 letters that we're not going to mention, perhaps, and kind of sit behind it. So that's something that's your Sunrise customers should expect in the next kind of 12 months, David. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
5 years.
So that they should certainly expect it coming through the next few years. Absolutely.
Right.
And yeah, the analogy, it's almost like the power happens at the back end, right? Whether it's AI or whether it's workflow, the simplification of the front end, where all I need to know is what my issue is or what I want to know. And then the power is at the back end, right? Be it workflow, AI, and almost like the analogy is the duck on the water, isn't it? The duck's smoothly going over, which is a front end, but the power is underneath the water. The back end, ideally AI and workflow is padding away until I get to a point, because that would take away issues like not having the full information, right? So if you have a ticket logged and you have to go back to the user, really we should be able to ask everything we need before we say, right, thank you, we'll now go ahead.
Do you know, right, there's a really good use case of this that you can see today. If you go to Google now and you do a search on Google, you'll get your traditional search, results, won't you? Your videos and whatever it may be. But at the top of that, you now get an AI generated response.
Yeah, the summary.
So if you say, how do I change a washer on my tap, right?
Yeah.
You'll get all your videos from the plumbers that have put that up and lots of, how-to type stuff underneath. But at the top, you'll get an AI generated response of what to do. And that is actually generated from, I guess, the Google equivalent of ticket data, right? So conversations that happen on Reddit and Quora and wherever else these conversations happen. And I can see that, happening in what you've just described, David. So a user goes, they have a normal plain language conversation with the tool set, and the tool set goes back through its training data, i.e. the many, many, many years of tickets, knowledge articles, etc., and draws the information from that rather than the pre-configured form-based interface and workflow that has traditionally happened. It's fascinating, isn't it, that we're getting there in some regards already, and it's clearly, I think you've called it out really nicely, it's going to come to these sorts of service management tool sets too.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, Sunil, I'm conscious of time. We're just we're running over the 30 minutes that we always aim for, but as per usual, it's been a fantastic conversation. We should definitely do a podcast challenge where every time somebody says AI, they have to donate £5 to charity. I think that would be.
We'll be skinned.
Yeah, we would have maximised the bank account on this particular session. But David, thank you ever so much again for your time. Really insightful conversation, as mentioned. For those of you listening, thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting. If you'd like to hear us talk about any other specific type topics, just get in touch and reach out. Or if you'd like to come on the show, contact Sunil or I through LinkedIn. We'd love to chat to you. David, thanks again.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you both, and we'll all speak soon. And yeah, take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.